Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
It's the time of the month where we pull back the veil, we saddle our horses, we ride from the steeps, our composite longbow, our composite shortbows flying in the air as we go by on the horns of Hattin. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, it's Jem Ducucu. Jem, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning to everybody.
Happy Easter, my friend. Have you been throwing chocolate eggs at the passers-by yet this morning?
Full disclosure, I went to do a little bit of cheeky shopping first thing this morning.
Yes.
And then I realized I haven't bought the kids their Easter eggs, so I need to do that this afternoon. There we go. That's an insight into my exciting life.
You see, because you see, we start one day early here in Spain because it's, processions, etc., etc. So it's been very interesting. And yesterday, those movies you see where they're getting the last chopper out of Saigon, because we talked about Vietnam before. That is Spanish supermarkets yesterday, because it is, for goodness sake, we've forgotten to, we've forgotten to get the chocolate eggs or whatever, and it's all very, very holy this week. So there you go. Now, we are talking about one of my favourite things in the world today, apart from history, and we're talking about, you say tomato, I say tomato, you say potato, I say potato, I say Constantinople, and you say
Istanbul.
Right. Now tell us more and get your bare naked ladies reference in now.
Well, I mean, it could be that, or it could be They Might Be Giants as well.
That's the one. They Might Be Giants. Sorry, I got it wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe play out on that one. I don't know, but right. Let's start with the very foundation. So, some of your listeners might have heard of the Byzantine Empire or have heard of the land of Byzantium.
Yes.
And actually, there was a tiny little Greek fishing village on the site of Constantinople called Byzantium. So, whenever you were referring to the Byzantine Empire or Byzantium, that was actually a Western European insult to the Eastern European Roman Empire. So it's like, you're nothing but a fishing village. Now, this insult's been totally forgotten, and now people just think, that's the really technical, accurate phrase. But I'll tell you right now, right up until 1453, when the last emperor of the East is defeated in a siege, we'll come on to that in a minute. But basically, right up until that point, 1453, these people called it the Eastern Roman Empire. These people who lived there did not call it Byzantium.
That's because Roman Empire has got so big that you need one to govern the West and one to govern the East. And are we talking plurocracy, oligarchy, tetrarchy? What are we talking? What archies have we got here, Jem?
So you've all heard of a Roman emperor, but by about the late 200s AD, they realized it was just such a gigantic place that it made no sense. Because if you're in Rome and there's trouble in Syria, it would take you like 3 months to find out about it.
Internet connection's rubbish, Jem. The dial-up time is least at the millennium.
We complain about 4G today. That's nothing compared to the problems that the Romans had. So there was this fairly sensible idea of we can have a Roman emperor, but let's actually have Caesars underneath them. And so therefore everything becomes subdivided. And critically, when we get to the early 300s AD, we have the arrival of this new emperor who had to fight a war to become emperor. He wasn't the rightful heir, but Constantine, and he realizes that the cohesion of the Roman Empire isn't what it used to be, and he decides to use religion as a way to unify everybody. Because we've got different peoples coming in now, there's lots of mass migration, etc., etc. But the point is, he thinks, well, let's do away with the old gods, because that every country, every nation, every people has its own multitude of gods. But what we'll do is we'll have the one God. Now, it's been misremembered that he was a Christian himself. He was converted on his deathbed, but he certainly wasn't Christian up until that point.
But what about the cross and the shields and the whole thing, Jem?
Yeah. So the Battle of Milvian Bridge. Yeah. We really don't have time to go.
I know.
It was. He used Jesus the way other people might use Mars, the war god. He certainly didn't. He hadn't read the stuff about love thy neighbor. That's for sure. But anyway. So he decides to found a new capital city further to the eastern, richer lands. Sorry, Britain,
Yep.
but you're not as wealthy as the Middle East. And therefore, if you look at where modern day Istanbul is situated, it's much closer to the stuff that's going on in the east, and indeed going south down to Egypt. It is a better geographical location.
Yep.
And to this day, Istanbul and the modern Republic of Turkey has this incredible trade route that takes you from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea.
Are we talking Silk Roads here, by the way? Are we on the Silk Route? Are we eventually...
Yes, it's on the very end of the Silk Route. And actually, so it's founded in the 300s. It becomes a trading post. It becomes a massive political power. It's also where you rally the troops. It becomes a cultural and religious center. But interestingly, he built it quickly. So literally they ripped down cool bits of other major cities around the empire and shoved them into Constantinople. And you can still see this in like the underwater or underground sort of like aqueduct.
Oh yes, the aqueduct, because they built.
I'm calling it the wrong thing, but it's that sort of thing.
It's a reservoir. It's an aquifire. No, it's where you keep your water, isn't it?
I think it is an aquifer. But anyway, yes.
And one of them is so big they've now got a football stadium in. That's what we're talking about here, isn't it? Right? Can we talk about? I know this is going to be an absolute dash through this. The walls. Because the walls of Istanbul / Constantinople are absolutely bleeding massive. People can't get through them. At the end, they have to bring in this gun, of which it makes the things that the Germans used to fire off on the back of railway wagons look quite small. So it's got well, it has, isn't it? It can only be fired 3 times a day, can't it? At the end. So the walls are obviously very, very important because it's that bridge, isn't it? I know this sounds like the tourist brochure, the brochures, but you've got Asia and you've got Europe. You've got a waterway going through. Is it the Golden Horde? He said
the Golden Horde is where Constantinople is mainly based. So
right.
it's if you imagine a triangle where the base of the triangle is the only land bit, that's where the walls are, although the walls go all the way around, but it's also defended on 3 sides, the other parts of the triangle, or 2 sides, I suppose, by water. So in other words, it's an incredibly useful defensive situation, but also great as a port to, again, bring in stuff from the Silk Road, which is a bad name for it, but we've done that before, on the Black Sea, but also up through the Mediterranean. So it's an incredible hub of everything, basically. Now, you sort of like jump forwards to the siege. So I've got 1,000 years to cover. So in 1 minute, I'm going to do 1,000 years. So
go.
It wasn't Constantine who built the double walls. There are actually 2 layers of walls. It was actually a later emperor called Theodosius II. And indeed, Constantinople suffers about a dozen sieges. And so, again, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pause on this. So the real peak of it is around about 500 AD under the Emperor Justinian, who is the last emperor who speaks Latin.
Is he the one with the interesting wife?
He's indeed with the interesting wife who had once been a sex worker.
A dancer.
Yeah, okay, dancer. We'll use that phrase. Sorry. But yeah, she was a working girl, and then she becomes emperor or empress, I should say, which is an amazing story of like from rags to riches kind of thing. There, he's an amazing story. We don't have time. Again, we try to pack in 2,000 years worth of history into half an hour.
Yep.
So the point is, this is an incredibly well defended site. It is attacked, multiple times by lots of different cultures as well. And indeed, it becomes a major target for Islam because in the time of the Prophet Muhammad's life, some of his followers say, "You are the greatest general ever," and he goes, "No." He's on the record of saying it. The greatest general in history will be the one who captures Constantinople. So at that point, Islam now knows if you want to be said in the same breath as the Prophet, we need to get it. And he chose well because it was a very tough nut to crack. So in 1204, we get the first successful break-in, although that's referred to as a sacking rather than as a siege or conquest, and that is the Fourth Crusade. But to give you an idea of how much it had fallen, so I said 500 is its peak. 1204, we're now in the Fourth Crusade. Yes,
Same, because we're leaping to the end because we like that, because we're kind of medievalists, we can be, don't we? And we like getting involved in our computer games. However, very important, the Byzantines, they regard themselves as the true Roman Empire, don't they? Let's not forget this, because I think we all miss this, because we all think Goths come into Rome. Rome isn't important in the 400s. It's gone. It's
not even the capital city of the Western Roman Empire.
It's Rimini,
That's
isn't it?
Ravenna.
Ravenna, yeah.
It's better defended.
Yes, exactly. So they see themselves as the true Romans. And this has been airbrushed out of our history, because we tend to think, all right, Istanbul, football team, whatever, Fenerbahce, Galatasaray. But these people see themselves as the true Romans. They keep this going for basically another 1,000 years after the sack fall of Rome.
Yeah, indeed. So they in 1204 they get taken out by the Western Christians. It's way too long to go into that. But there's a permanent scar of this. So from the hippodrome, which is hippos is the Greek for a horse.
Yes.
It's nothing to do with hippos.
Yes.
But basically where you did all the horse racing, they took the massive ancient bronze statues of the horses and took them to Venice.
Yes, it is.
And so the horses of St. Mark's are no such thing. They were taken in 1204 in the Fourth Crusade. The Fourth Crusade, even at the time, was referred to as a war crime.
Yeah.
It was hugely controversial. There was no glory in it whatsoever. They ended up attacking a Christian city rather than any of the Muslims. So it was just a total shambles. And so when people talk about we need to send this thing back to its home country, well, a very good argument is this is war spoils in an illegal war. Absolutely, Venice should send the four horses back to Constantinople, Istanbul now. But of course, those four horses have been, over the last 800 years, they've become instrumental in the identity of Venice. And indeed, they were stolen by Napoleon and put into France during his occupation of Italy. So they've got this whole other story. But this is all going back to Constantinople and how important it is in the Western imagination.
But people see Constantinople and they literally weep because it is so glorious. We have mechanical animals going off. We have thrones that, I don't know, have fire. We've got the bleeding, the biggest dome, in the actual known world, and quite a lot of the unknown world as well. I mean, this is a place that people go to, and I was going to say the same way they look at Dubai, but absolutely not. But you know what I'm saying here? They go there and they are blown away. It is the high-tech, high-culture capital of the universe.
For a time, yes. As I said, so so going back to 1204, the Fourth Crusade, to show you how much it had declined in the next 700 years, is inside the walls, it wasn't packed full of buildings. There was agriculture. There was farmland inside. At its peak, around about 500, we're talking about 500,000 people. But by the time we get to the Fourth Crusade, it's more like 80,000. Now, at the time, London was 30,000. It's still a big city by Western standards, but it's a former shadow of its former self. But going back to the dome, I absolutely wanted to spend some time on this. I think the most important building on planet Earth is San Sophia, or Hagia Sophia as it's known. If you look at it written down, it looks like Hagia.
Yeah,
you pronounce that Hagia.
Right.
And so there'd previously been a church built there, but under that Emperor Justinian, he spent an absolute fortune building what you see today. It was founded in like the early 500s. And what it is, it's the largest dome in the world, and indeed it's only beaten in the Renaissance era, so over 1,000 years later. And for nearly 1,000 years, it was the largest church in the world. But also, when the Russian peoples, the princes of Moscow, they wanted to sort of unify their people with the religion, sound familiar? They ended up going all across Western Europe to see, what have you got? And they were so impressed with Hagia Sophia, they said it was as if we were walking into heaven. And so that is why today Russia is Orthodox Christian rather than Catholic Christian, because Orthodox Christianity comes from Constantinople, basically. And so you can see the echoes happening to this day. So first of all, it's the world's largest church, full stop, in the world. It's the largest dome in the world. This is for over 1,000 years. Neither of those things can have no other building has held those records. And then the other thing is it gets taken over by the Ottoman Empire in 1453, which we're coming to very shortly. And then it's converted into a mosque until the 1930s. And the thing is, though, if you look at Hagia Sophia today, you go, that's a mosque. And the reason why you think it's a mosque is because it was so important in the Islamic world, they started emulating it. If you think about where Islam started in the Middle East, and particularly in Saudi Arabia, it doesn't rain an awful lot. The very earliest mosques didn't have roofs on them. You didn't need them. And there were a few domes beforehand, but this idea of dome and the sort of crescent, which was actually a religious Christian or a sign of Constantinople, had nothing to do with Islam, but you get this pickup of this imagery taken all across the Islamic world. So you have this one building affecting two major religions, and also sort of like breaks all kinds of records. And I can't think of another building on planet Earth that has that level of influence.
Can I just underline that? Because I was about to say that. The crescent, it's not some sort of scimitar that people go, oh, you see, that's a problem with Muslims. You said they've got a crescent. It's not a crescent. It's the symbol. It used to be on a silk flag, and it's the sign of Constantinople.
Yes, absolutely. So, although in 1204 they lose their emperors and it gets run by the Latins, because it gets to be called the Latin Empire, for about 50 years, I should say, they get kicked out. I mean, at that point, it looks like game over. Yeah. And I have to say, I always hated reading about the period from like the 1260s to 1453, because it is just constant, gradual, slow, aching decline. And these people are just if they actually united, they would be able to stop the rot. But there's such internecine scheming, etc. We got the phrase today, a Byzantine plot, just meaning a really complicated plot. And there's, one of the things is you could not be an emperor if you were blind. And so the amount of people who end up getting blinded or killed or hung or thrown out of the window or whatever. It's just massacre after massacre, and they cannot get their act together.
Can I just two things? One, more purple in Constantinople than Prince's wardrobe, because they like a bit of purple, don't they?
Yes.
Two, earliest, people go, oh, you see, the problem on sport, it's all, the spectators, they're all hooligans. Constantinople takes football or sports hippo hooliganism to a new bleeding level.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to Justinian and the race
dancer,
tracks,
yeah.
And the dancer, but also specifically the racetrack. The different teams were just named after colours. There's the blue team, there was the red team, etc. And indeed, the richest person in sports history is one of these chariot racers. Hugely, we think of the gladiators. Yeah, people went to see gladiators. I mean, it faded away once we get to the Christianity. But even in the pagan Roman era, more people went to the horse racing than the gladiator sports. But yeah, sometimes there were these huge riots, and there was one riot that led to the burning of thousands of buildings. Yep. They had to send in the army, and again, hundreds, if not thousands, were massacred and killed to sort of like to calm everybody down. So there is no equivalent to that in modern day hooliganism. I mean, that's a whole other level.
Away. You're there, Millwall away on a Wednesday. Just you can imagine the Emperor's coming out. What?
Amateurs, Giles.
I can see it, and we haven't even got on to. I mean, A, should we say we'll save eunuchs for another day, shall we? But B,
yeah, absolutely,
I think we should. But B, Varangian guards.
Yes, so the emperors worked out that because everybody's so disloyal and scheming all the time, let's get some strapping Scandinavian lads in. And indeed, there was Harold Hardrada, the last Viking who invaded England in 1066. He had been a Varangian guard. It's where basically, if you were big and tough, you would go there for a few years and earn your money. And so Varangian, if you translate it, means the oath takers. So that's one of the coolest names. And they were head to foot in chainmail with these double-handed battle axes. They were just, elite guards, absolutely terrifying. They fought on the battlements during the Fourth Crusade, and they were there at the very end as well.
Now, a lot of people think Vikings only go west because that's the way that we write history wrong, but they go all the way through the Danube, and there's a huge, isn't there? The Rus, etc. That whole thing that ends up in Constantinople. Harold Hardrada ends up, doesn't he, fighting a dragon, allegedly might have been a big snake.
Yes.
Yeah.
A giant serpent, but both don't exist, so anyway. But anyway, we don't have time.
I know we don't have time. So
look. Let's get to like 1453. So the Ottoman Empire is founded around about 1300. It starts growing, and interestingly, it grows past Constantinople, and they try several times to take it, and they just can't. There was even an attempt with cannons, early cannons, so they still can't breach these walls. But then in 1453, we get the 21-year-old Mehmet II, now forever known as Mehmet Fatih, which means Mehmet the Conqueror. And he, at 21, he throws everything he's got at it, and it's still a month-long siege. At one point, if you remember, I mentioned that it's on two sides. It's got covered by water, and indeed they protect these waterways with a massive chain. So it comes up with the genius and revolutionary idea of literally dragging his fleet over the isthmus, over land to get into the water.
I want to be at that management meeting. Tell you what, boys, we're going to get the ships and we're going to roll them. You know those slaves we've got? Right, I got a job for you guys. And we're going to roll them over the land. What?
And it worked, is the simple answer. And so he conquers it. And at that point, this is the fourth capital city of the Ottoman Empire. In the first 150 years, they had 4 different capital cities, which shows you that they just kept, the bigger, the more impressive the city, that's now our capital. That's now our capital. And so that becomes the capital of the Ottoman Empire until the 1920s. And the thing that's kind of misremembered is the Ottomans turn up and destroy everything. Absolutely not. The Grand Bazaar, which is the largest covered marketplace in the world, was created by Mehmet II because he understood how important it was as a center of commerce. Yeah. So, they rebuild, and on the ruins of the old Byzantine palace, they build Topkapi Palace, which is now sort of like the epicenter of the Ottoman Empire, which is where we get to, and I know you want to talk about this, the harem.
Of course, yeah, I've got my eunuchs out of the way, and it is good, it's Good Friday tomorrow, so let's get, let's atone for our sins. Tell us about the harem, Jem.
So, it isn't what everybody thinks it is.
Oh, Jem.
It is
Got
basically...
me Turkish delight on the side here. I was about to sort of start fronding myself. I said frond. Anyway, off you go.
So I've written a book called The Sultans, which is all about the Ottoman Empire. And what you find is, if it's written by a Turk about the Ottoman Empire, it's always like, everything they do is brilliant. Yay. And it's like, no, history's more complicated than that. But if it's written by a Westerner, even if it's a fairly, serious historical writer, there still is this sense of exoticism in it. And it's like, no, let's just strip all of that out. Because in Islam, you can have 4 wives. This was originally created because there have been so many battles and violence, there just weren't enough men around to protect the women. So it's like, well, hey, you can have more than one woman, but you've got to treat them all equally. However, 4 wives. However, even then, across, basically from modern day Turkey all the way through to China, people would have sort of like groups of concubines, because if it's not in Christianity, there's sort of like a looser definition of fidelity, shall we say, because it is very much hung up on biblical concepts there. So, there were, if you were a senior person in the Ottoman Empire, as a sign of status, you'd probably have multiple wives, but you'd also probably have multiple concubines as well. Topkapi just did it best because they're the emperor, they're the sultan, and so you had up to 300 women. But again, you had to look after these women. It wasn't like they're all lying there naked, and then the sultan just comes in, throws his clothes off, and jumps into a huge pile of girls.
This is not the manosphere.
Absolutely not. So the women themselves, technically, they were all slaves. They were all Christians, so they came from places like modern-day Ukraine or Bulgaria or Greece or Serbia or Hungary, So, and then they were converted to Islam, but then they get to live in a palace, and they've got guards. The eunuchs were males, guards, were male eunuchs, but also they were black as well. This is double protection because, if the kids definitely ain't coming out looking like dad if that's the case. So, I'm just going to say this very quickly.
Dawn has said, I can't wait for the eunuchs. So there you go, Dawn. There's your eunuchs for the day.
So they were referred to as the angels because they could pass from one world to the other. They were the people whose responsibility was the security of these women. If anybody else was found there, it would be instant death, simple as that. And indeed, there was a lot of murder and scheming going on in there because while these women were slave girls, but like I said, they were fed, they were taught how to read, write poetry, musical instruments. They were, they were meant to be intelligent women, well-skilled women, pretty, yes. And by the way, after 10 10 years, if you hadn't been, 300 girls, you ain't going to catch the eyes of the Sultan. So after 10 years, if you hadn't got anywhere, you then left the harem, but you were incredibly high status. You were a woman of the harem, and you could get a really good marriage to like a general or something like that in the Ottoman Empire. So these women's lives were actually improved. This is a really hard conversation because slavery is obviously bad, but this is not an example of like horrific slavery or anything like that. This is one of these things where, well, your choice is be a pretty girl dying of starvation in the field or being a pretty girl getting well fed in a palace.
Listeners, you cannot see the backtracking and pedaling that Jem is doing on my feed at the moment as he's explaining this, but it's a thing to be seen. It's like watching a kayak master as he's paddling on the rapids. Well put.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, I'm just going to very quickly say they even made sure that the cucumbers were mashed when they were sent into the harem. And then I'm just going to keep going and I'm just going to keep going and say, it was a place where politics was done. Basically, the firstborn son of the Sultan was likely to be the next Sultan. But what happens if you're the chosen, your girl number 2 has her son number 2, but you're the favorite? And there were literally murders of children going on in the harem. It's also where the Sultan would literally, there's a wonderful bit where the leaders, like the prime ministers, etc., the viziers, would sit there and have the plans, and behind them there was a screen with a curtain. Was the Sultan there? Was the Sultan not there? It was almost like an early version of CCTV, because everybody had to be on their best behavior, because what if the Sultan's listening? But the Sultan might be in a different town at that time. So it was, it's an incredibly, it's an incredible place to visit. I really recommend you do this. There's fountains everywhere because the noise cancels out. So you could literally stand close to each other, whisper, nobody could overhear you. So you could keep secrets. There's these little alcoves everywhere for everybody's turbans to be taken off, which was traditional as well. It's a remarkable place. If you ever get to go to, and this is the other thing, the Ottomans didn't change the name to Istanbul. That became the local slang. Nobody's quite sure how. It seems to be a mangling of, like, in Greek, of going, I'm going to the city. Yeah. And it's like, well, what city? There's only one city. It's Istanbul. So it was, even all of the court documents, it was still called Constantinople up until the 1920s. It's only when we get the foundation of the Turkish Republic, where they deliberately cut ties with the old Ottoman ways. That is why today the capital city of Turkey, Republic of Turkey, is not Istanbul. That's the largest city in Turkey. It's Ankara, because they wanted to have some place more defendable, but also separate themselves. And that is also why they renamed it to Istanbul. India did the same thing. Bombay is Mumbai. We're in charge now. We're sort of wiping the slate clean, and we sometimes do that by renaming things.
Jem, how much of the original Constantinople, Istanbul? I mean, without the Hagi, whatever you call it, the tourist bit that we see. Are there walls still around? I mean, can you see?
Yeah, there's bits of the walls. I mean, it was blasted in the siege. Yeah. But there's still bits of the wall. There's still, if you want to look at the Roman Constantinople, there is still elements of it there. If you want to see the Islamic one in its prime as well, this is like the 1500s, like 1,000 years later. You can see some of these things, the Blue Mosque, the Suleymaniye, and all these sorts of things as well. And it does show you that, there is this incredible Islamic architecture that, again, people sort of underestimate as well. And so it is an amazing city because you get all these different cultures smashing into each other. Plus you get these epic views. We're talking about the Trojan Wars. They looked across the Dardanelles, according to the Trojan Wars. The Dardanelles is basically the water bit separating east and west, 2 different continents there on the edges of Constantinople. It's as historical and as epic and as mythological as it gets.
So, listeners, if you think Granada's good, basically, with its fountains and its alcoves and its Arabic architecture, get yourself to Istanbul, Constantinople, whatever. Just, because I just don't mention the eunuchs. A few bits and pieces here have been coming in. Mashed cucumbers has to be the takeaway from this interview. People are sending me cucumber memes all over the place. Brilliant and funny, says Sam in Ibiza. Cookie up in Galicia. I know I'm going to love this interview. And somebody said, "I'm so sorry about the cucumber." If you were a fruit, whatever, if you were a cucumber seller, if you had to go back in time, Jem, in Constantinople, would you be the fine purveyor of the harem's cucumber?
Simple answer is no, but I'll finish off with a food fact for you.
1 minute.
So the Romans had the placenta cake, which just means layers. It's phyllo pastry. It had bay leaves in it. It was
Thank God for that.
savory.
Yeah.
But it was changed in the 1500s to have a sugar base, and pistachios were added to it, and that's where baklava comes from. It was created for Suleiman the Magnificent, an Ottoman sultan in Topkapi Palace in the 1500s. There we go.
Wow. Okay, there you go then. So that's the one. Right. If people want to follow you, you've got 30 seconds, Jem. Sell it.
Condensed Histories podcast. Find it everywhere. The Sultan's book, wherever you get books. And I'm at Jem Ducucu on the Twitter and everything else.
Indeed. And I can't play Istanbul, not Constantinople, because I've got 19 seconds. Jem, as always, brilliant. We got through basically a thousand years of history. 2,000 years of history in under half an hour. Jem, we'll see you next month. Have a great Easter.
Same to you.